But again, it's the process. Account.
Welcome back to the Money Mindset Mentoring Podcast. Today we have Ann McNeill with us, and I'm so excited. She's a speaker, she's an author, she's an entrepreneur, multi-entrepreneur. And Ann, you've been quoted, being part of a mastermind group will help you go through life consciously with awareness and purpose. And I want to talk a little bit about that because you're very heavy on the idea of the importance of masterminds.
Yes, well, everything that I've done, with the exception of my family and salvation, everything has been centered around this idea and the concept of masterminding, which, as we know, is when you bring 2 or 3 individuals together. I suggest like-minded and like-spirited. Can I say that again?
Absolutely.
They must be like-minded and like-spirited to help you achieve your goals, and you help them achieve theirs. And from that process, since 1979, 1980, I've created 5 businesses from that concept and that process of masterminding.
It's amazing. I mean, let's jump back to, the 70s. We all got our bell bottoms on and big hair, and you're looking at your very first mastermind.
Right.
I want to take you back to that moment. What did it change in you in doing that?
Wow. My very first mastermind started as a result of me reading the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I got to one page of the book where the author asked me, I made it personal, Ann McNeill, how much money do you want? And I never thought about that had ever been asked that question. The second question he asked me was, Ann McNeill, how much, what are you going to do in return for the money? I thought I had a good corporate job. That was enough. But the third question he asked me was by what date? But the fourth question he asked me was, where was my plan? And I didn't have one. So as I started on that journey by myself, tried to figure out a plan, as I continued to read the book, I came upon the principle of the mastermind concept. And he suggested get together a few friends, serve as an accountability. So we started our first group by me just handing the book around, which I don't suggest anybody should do that. Okay. Started meeting. We just focused on those 4 steps. And the 5th one was to recite, to create a plan and an affirmation. And the 6th step was to repeat it twice a day. So I put together 10 individuals, and we started meeting, Steve, every single Saturday, 52 weeks on those questions. And everything else grew out of that for every single one of us. And that was the beginning of the process for me.
And when you were doing that process, you've got the 10 people there, you're going through having conversations and masterminding. What was the most uncomfortable truth that in those early masterminds, what is the most uncomfortable truth that you had to face? And then how did it shift your trajectory?
Okay, let's talk about that. For me, every Saturday, I would say the same thing. I wanted to save $1,000 a year. I had a good corporate job, I thought. But it was not enough. And so I decided I would start a construction company. And every single Saturday, I would say the same thing, which was, I'm going to start a construction company. I had no plan. And I would say the same thing every Saturday. And one of my friends who was in our mastermind group, yes, in my home, she cursed me. I don't use the curse word she used, but she said, I am just so, sick and tired of you. Every week you come and you say the exact same thing. Do something. And for where I was in my life, I didn't know what to do. And she blurted out, she said, take a course, but do something, take a class. And I thought to myself, wow, take a class. I never thought about taking a class. And I shared with our National Association of Black Women in Construction, which I also founded many years later. I said, if I had not pushed through that, we would not be represented in 15 cities across the U.S. Actually, I was in Houston when I shared that story, same story. But by me being willing to be vulnerable with like-minded and like-spirited people, she didn't say it in a mean spirit. She was just sick and tired. And how often are we sick and tired, but we won't do something? It's like the story we hear about, old Yeller sitting there on a nail and, it wasn't hurt bad enough for him to get up and do something about it. And that's really where I was. But I'm so glad that I pressed and I pushed through. And I did. I signed up for construction trade school class, learn how to build from the ground up, but I also started to take our state general contractors exam. Now that's another story, because
Yeah.
it took 6 tries to pass, but that's neither here nor there. Who cares if I only passed by 1 point? But that was one of the stories experiences that came out of masterminding with a group of individuals. So I keep saying like-minded, like-spirited, very important.
Yeah. You can be in those, what is it? My dad had this picture up on his wall in his office, and it said, "It's hard to soar like an eagle when you work with turkeys." And so I thought that was rather interesting. And it's sort of a play around that Dunbar rule around, and I think it was Jim Rohn, actually, probably, who said it first, which is you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with.
Jim Rohn said that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, when it comes to masterminds, what's the biggest myth that people still get wrong about?
I believe one of the largest myths is that you can just invite a lot of people and they will have your best interest in heart. I think that that's a myth. The way I teach masterminding is start with one person, only one. The 2 of you must be in total agreement on the 3rd. The 3 of you must be in total agreement on the 4th. And the 4 of you must be in total agreement on the 5th, and so on, if you choose to build a free. Oftentimes we don't talk about, Steve, the difference between a fee mastermind and a free mastermind. And so there are many masterminds that you can pay individuals, and we all know or have been a part of them, where we pay $10, $20, $50,000 and more to be in a group that you pay fees. But then I am a strong supporter of free masterminds for family and friends, of like-minded, like-spirited, because you can have some family members and some friends who are not like-minded and like-spirited, and they don't have your best interest in heart, which is why you start with one person. And I think that that's one of the myths that exists in terms of masterminding. Everybody's not going to have your best interest in heart.
So what you're saying is most people, when they look at masterminds, they're looking at, how can I fill the room? And, how can I get more people in here? What can I use to attract the people? What I'm hearing you say is what's equally, if not more important, who should not be in the room.
Absolutely.
And cutting that out.
Absolutely.
What are your no-goes on that? Where do you draw that line that it's a hard line no matter what the mastermind's about?
If in your spirit that person does not connect, I get a chill just sharing this. If in your spirit that person does not connect in your spirit, I don't care who it is. I don't care who it is. They're not the right ones. They're not the right ones. And I've been doing this now since 1979, 1980. And every single time I go against that rule, yes, I have. Every time I've watched my clients do the same, it does not turn out well over time. But the gut does not lie. We can lie on the gut. The spirit does not lie. We lie on the spirit, but it does not lie. No.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to interpret when you talk about the gut. If I were somebody who might not be able to read those signals, what would those signals look like?
Well, we have a process as a part of masterminding. And part of my process is the Think and Grow Rich book. Everybody's not going to read it. Everybody don't get it. But like-minded and like-spirited individuals, I'm not talking about people with degrees. I'm not talking about people with a lot of money, but there's something in their spirit. There's a drive that when you're walking through the book and the principles with them, they show up, they're prepared, they're ready, or they don't. They have an excuse. Like Jim Rohn, since you mentioned him, he has many stories where he talk about, the guy who, he didn't show up to the meeting. He said, well, I had to fix the screen door. I mean, all of these excuses. At what point do you know they're not the right one? Well, they need the money. Well, and we have all of these excuses for them, only to find that, and this is something else I'm finding, it might be more about my lack of character, my lack of self-confidence, that I need to surround myself with people who I think are lower than me to make me feel good about myself. And that is a part of the inner work we do as we walk through these principles of the Think and Grow Rich philosophy. And then it's not the only book we read. Actually, we read a book or something in 10 different areas of our lives. So I don't want your listeners to think about it's all about that particular book. It's just one of the best, along with many others.
Yeah, I think it's recognized definitely as one of the best, just, hands down. I agree with that. Now, when you have the mastermind and you're we all know what happens is you can see these like courses, webinars, masterminds, any of these things where people congregate and talk about, higher ideas and conceptualizing what the big goal is. How do you get people from that motivation dopamine hit into actually getting into execution on doing the things that they need to do to make
Go
impact?
back to the tough question you asked me. What was a personal experience that I had to push through? And the key is strategy and action plans. You see, the fifth step that Napoleon Hill had in the 6 steps, and I call it my 6 steps to riches. He said, where's your plan? And that's what I say to my coaching clients when they say, I want to do X. I said, okay, where's your plan? And who's holding you accountable for that plan? Because oftentimes our plans are not vetted by individuals who are experts in vetting those kinds of plans. And I'll go back to another story that we've read about 6 Feet from Gold. And the book Think and Grow Rich, the author talks about, Mr. Darby. He set out to find gold and he found gold, had a vein of gold and went back and borrowed money and all of that, came back and stopped 6 feet from gold, sold the whole bunch to a junk man who had enough sense. He wasn't as smart as Darby, but he had enough sense to hire an expert who taught him about fault lines. And sure enough, the fault lines showed. But here we go again. When you're masterminding, are you masterminding with a group of individuals who are like-minded, like-spirit, but also experts in their field of endeavor or aspiring to be? And when you have a situation like this, are you willing to consult an expert, hire a coach, or somebody to help you take that strategy to the next level? So those
Yeah, I
would
think
be,
that's,
yes.
yeah. And I think the idea of an expert, I think that is definitely a vetting point too, when you're trying to filter the room, because, if you're surrounded by a bunch of people who are same level, that's you're gonna learn in groupthink, but you're not gonna learn from that expertise that might be
Absolutely.
coming in to help you avoid those pitfalls that you're all gonna hit on the way there. Now, when people are, I want to talk about getting into action, because it's something that where you talked about, I'm tired of listening to you talk about doing something, just go do anything. And I think
Yes,
that's probably one of the biggest challenges, because people don't struggle with setting goals. Everybody loves setting goals. We have New Year's. There is millions and billions of goals that are set every New Year's that are never achieved. And I think you often say that people struggle not with goals, but they struggle rather with consistency.
exactly.
And when you're looking at their system and you want to hit that system with consistency, how do you create accountability that actually sticks?
Well, I'll use myself as an example. When we talked about pressing through and getting that license. First, I had to surround myself with individuals who had passed that test. I also surrounded myself with individuals who were taking the test. I also surrounded myself with individuals who were teaching and had the greatest success of successful individuals who passed the test. But I didn't just stop there, because that was just one part of the process. I also started aligning myself with associations, individuals who were in construction, because the end goal was not to pass the test. The end goal was not to start the business. The end goal was to make money from the business. And there are millions of individuals who've passed the test, but they've done absolutely nothing to do with the license. So a part of my framework, coming back to your question about what can individuals do when we mastermind and accountability, part of my framework deals with, first, are you an expert in your craft? I take myself for an example in terms of being in the construction industry. That's a business all by itself. And so as we mastermind, I had to begin to learn the nuances of the business of construction. I mean, one of the nuances also is the operations of the business. And I shared with you when we were prepping for this podcast, I said, one of my unofficial partners early in my business career was, the IRS and workers' comp.
Yeah.
Do you understand the operations of your expertise in that business? But one that we seldom focus on is the business of the relationships. So when you ask me, what can people do? How about you think about people who are doing what you want to do And are you willing to connect with them? Right now we have, the connections from LinkedIn, social media, all of these ways. But it's interesting how when you reach out to somebody who's paid the price, oftentimes they will take your call because they know how many calls they made to individuals like them back then. And as long as you're not trying to, if you will, get something for nothing, but earnestly on this journey, oftentimes people will engage with you. So the relationships that we build, and if you're involved in associations for your craft and your industry, you're already around individuals who are doing exactly what you want to do. But Steve, I would say this, when we mastermind, if we keep first things first, the business of the money, when you talk about the fact that oftentimes we're in business and we're busy and money is not a focus.
Okay.
And so that is also something that we really should consider masterminding around the fact that we're taught how to make money, but seldom are we taught how to make money. And that's another mastermind group to connect with in terms of being an investor.
Yeah, and I want to jump into the money aspect a little bit later on. I really want to, jump one more time on this accountability, because I think to connect yourself to the results, it's not just about setting the goals. It's not just about setting the plan. It's about the consistency in the tasks that need to get done and being accountable to doing those things. If we were going to look at today, what's one thing that you still struggle to maintain accountability with?
My goodness. For me, I'm committed to make 5 calls a day for my construction business. And I'm committed to make that before a certain time of day. What I struggle is that there's so many other competing activities that if I don't have a list, a big list, and if I don't have those numbers in my phone, where all I have to do is click one. And so it is the strategy, yes, but it's also the action, yes, but also I have an accountability buddy at my office who's called my COO, where every morning we get on the phone and we make those calls before Ann McNeill does anything else, or Ann McNeill does not do anything else. And I'm also in a mastermind group that we meet every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern, where I have to give an account to them that I make those calls. And so accountability goes a lot of different ways. And I think that for those of us who mastermind, not just for the money, and we'll get into the other areas, but it's also about the life. So let's come back to the accountability for the money. Having a written, documented plan, number one is really the goal. And then having a plan and having an accountability buddy and having an accountability group. And as the founder of the International Mastermind Association, I'm always asking individuals who's holding your group accountable. Because I contend that all mastermind groups, especially if they're free groups, should have a group goal. All mastermind groups, if they're for family and friends, you should have a mastermind group goal collectively. And may I share an example?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. The mastermind group that I'm in, we've been together, many of us, for 20 years. And in the beginning, we would set a goal. Once a year, we would all go to a women's conference. It was a women's retreat. We save money all year. We get our airline, hotel, our registration. We took all year to do that. And on the date, we were at that conference. We did that for years. But as we've aged, that was a group goal. Now, we had individual goals that we work on. But as we have aged, we realize that we need a group goal once a year that deals with our health. So years ago, we said everybody should have long-term care insurance. We set a goal. Year 1, we didn't all get it. 2, all of us did not get it. About year 3, one of the members found out from the insurance company that she had a blood disease that they would not insure her. That would have never happened if we had not set the goal. And so now she's on medication for that. The following year, when we all got that insurance, we said everybody should have disability insurance. So my point is, for me, when you mastermind the life, free mastermind with family and or friends, what group goal are you setting that collectively as a group, we're going to do something together once a year? So those are just some thoughts about the accountability for not just the individuals in the group, but also the group itself. But when you're meeting every single week, may not make all 52 weeks, that is a really good way to be accountable. Also, I would suggest you document. We have a process as a part of our mastermind group that if it's not written, you cannot report it. So that cuts down on the talking when you come together.
That is so critical. There's so many different brands of these groups that get together for businesses. And some of them are very ritualistic. You go in, you've got to say the slogan, then you go in and everybody says their numbers, and you look at that and you think, well, if it was just written down that everybody had the numbers as they went in, you'd spend less time gathering data and you'd
Absolutely.
spend more time processing data. So
Absolutely.
your approach where you say, you write things down, you have a journal, you have a group mission, group goals, vision boards, that sort of thing. These things necessarily aren't rituals that you can see in a lot of these other groups. They're more really of accountability systems in disguise.
Well, that's why I created the International Mastermind Association over 20 years ago, where we come together once a year and we bring our life in writing, where we are required, yes, we're required, even the children, to have a written goal for your spiritual life, a written goal, and it could just be one goal for your family, a written goal for your finance, a written goal for your health, a written goal for your education, a written goal for your personal development, your business or your career, your recreation, your creativity, and your civic. And we ask you to write those goals for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And right now I'm in my 44th year.
That's amazing. Now, the idea of writing them is one of the most powerful practices. Is that the most powerful one? Has it been the most life-changing? And if not, what would be another one that is?
Reciting your affirmation daily. Reciting your affirmation daily. I am here right now doing your podcast in Tampa, and I am looking into your screen, but to the right of my camera is my granddaughter, who is 8 years old. She has been masterminding since she was 3. She wrote her first book when she was 6, and she's right now writing her second book. She set a goal to read 300 books this year, and she's writing her autobiography at 8 years old. Now, what's my point? My point is this. No, sit down. I'm not going to need you to do anything. Just, nope, sit. Now, my point in sharing this with you is this: masterminding the family and the life. Masterminding the family and the life, and starting very early. So that's my granddaughter. My second daughter, I started her same age. And as a result of starting her same age, she became the baby billionaire, teaching people how to analyze stocks and how to invest. Now, I'm saying that because, again, we can talk about the money, but when you have written an affirmation that you're reciting every single day, twice a day, I would say that goes along with the accountability, because now subconsciously and subliminally, it is impacting your subconscious mind.
Yeah, I think that rituals are so important, whether it's a stretch in the morning to, engage your body, or a metaphysical stretch to engage your mind. Having rituals are so key. When you look at elements like that, or attendance, or accountability, any of these things, we've talked about how people start things, and we talk about the routines that they're supposed to do. But I want to talk about which ones do people abandon early and why?
I think we all tend to abandon that which we do not have a strong desire to achieve. If lifting weights in the gym is, you start with a light weight and you do the repetitions. But when you pick up a heavier weight, it's a little harder to keep doing that. And I think that with goal setting, sometimes we've far reached too soon to not be willing to take the baby steps and get the habit ingrained, versus trying to reach for $1 million and you are struggling in your bank account to clip checks, And so I'll go back to when I started learning about saving and investing as an adult with an undergraduate degree in accounting and working on a master's degree. I did not know the difference between saving and investing. So I started with an envelope as a part of our mastermind group, we started an investment club, but I started with an envelope and I just put $20 in one envelope to save, $20 in one envelope to invest, $20 in one envelope to, for myself. My point is I started very small, very, very, very small. And over time, I mean, years, then I said, I always want to pay down one small bill. I didn't try to pay off for more, so masterminding small goals and get the repetition in, get the habit developed so it's ingrained. Now, when you get a raise, which I did, I increased it just a little and then just a little and just a little until I could finally pay off all my debt and then still continue to invest $20 a month, not a week or a day. But once you get that habit, and I think that that's what happens to so many of us, we try to do too much and the weight is too heavy.
So the idea of being successful at trying to achieve whatever it is, as you say, lifting weights or building a business, making $1 million, a billion, whatever the number is, it's the idea of, number one, you need to set a goal, but you need to translate that goal through systems. And once you translate that through goals, through systems, you have to have consistency. And that's usually underpinned by, two things. One would be internal and external accountability. And then the last thing is you need to have that willpower to keep on going. And that willpower is truly fed by celebrating those wins and saying that, every day, because you've taken that one big elephant of a momentous goal and broke it down into digestible, smaller goals. And by winning every day, you're able to really start to feed that big monster so you can see that success.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Even with all of that, people still abandon. And I don't want to let go of this one because this is the one that I'm trying to solve the most. Is even with the best systems, the best models, the best goals, the best strategies, the best accountability, the best of the best of the best, they still abandon. They believe they want. Some people abandon even if they are at their last moment of they need this. It's not that they want it. Why do they still abandon?
I keep coming back to the dream. If the dream is not big enough, I shared with a friend, I many years was the motivator to the motivator Les Brown. A lot of people did not know that. And so when he talked about riding on the back of that garbage truck, I knew him then. When he talked about, that, radio station, I knew him then. When he talked about his mom, and that's the point I want to get to about the dream not being big enough, and this is why we quit. When he talks about his mom, everything he did was for his mother. When he talked about buying his mom a house, that was my house he bought for his mom. Now, when his mom passed away, that dream began to pass also. And the hunger was not there as strong as it was because she was gone. And I think so often, for many of us, the dream is not big enough to pull us through the challenge. And I think that's why many people quit. And that's why I think also every desire, you take even the book Think and Grow Rich, the desire is the first principle. Faith was not the first principle. Autosuggestion was not the first principle. Organized planning was not the first principle. It was desire. And I believe that is because that other book says that I would give you the desires of your heart. But what is it that you're desiring that you need to mastermind? And if that desire, some people call it your why. But if that desire is not strong enough to pull you through any wind-blowing challenge or struggle or problem, will just wipe you out. And that, Steve, is why I think most people quit. I use myself for example.
I think desire, not to knock Simon Sinek and start with why, I think desire is a stronger, more applicable word because desire can create action in the things that we should do, and it can create actions in the things that we shouldn't do. And it's so powerful, especially when you talk about the things that we shouldn't do. You're at the store and you're thinking, I'll just get one box of cookies. We'll be fine. And because I believe personally that most decisions that people make, people say I make a logical, I am a very logical person. It's like, well, that's great. But most decisions, if not all decisions, are led by emotions and then validated with logic.
Absolutely.
So
Without a
desire
doubt.
is the most powerful at the hierarchy.
And that's why everything we do when we mastermind, we start with the desire. My desire when I started this process was to make $1,000. But I had to deal with the debt. And as I began to put small amounts of money away, I grew in my weightlifting to begin to learn more about how money makes money, paying down debt, and how do you pay down large amounts of money you owe people. How about call them up in the phone and say, listen, I intend to pay you, but can we work out a plan? What? So to me, again, going back to the weightlifting and why many people quit, we don't sometimes mastermind ideas with others, and it could be chat GPT, but whoever you're masterminding with, but talking about what are some ideas that can help me just take the next step. You take that one small step, and then the next day, what's the next small step? And then what's the next small step? And I do believe that would help with the accountability, because you don't need to wait till the end of the week to know you didn't make those 5 calls yesterday. And if you don't make them today, you're not going to make 25 calls in one day at the end of the week.
But catch up never happens.
Well, exactly. But it's the accountability to somebody. We call ours accountability buddy. And so inside of each mastermind group that we create, we have buddies, 2 people buddy together. I have created for the National Speakers Association for the last 15 years what's called the Black NSA $1 Million Mastermind, where I've coached over 1,000 people who are professional speakers on how to mastermind their speaking business to make money. And I only focus on the money. It's not the health. It's not the family. I don't, all of that, but I do it as a volunteer. Again, my point is people have made millions of dollars in going through this process with me because we do 10 weeks, we set the goal, and every single Monday we come and we give an account. But again, it's the process, accountability.
One of the things that I think is antithesis to most messages is everybody says think big, think big, think big, which you're definitely supporting the idea of think big, but you're also talking about how to execute small to support thinking big and then be accountable to doing that. Now, I want to pivot a little bit where somebody's saying, okay, we've used this word mastermind a bunch of times, and if somebody's looking to try to think about getting in a mastermind, but they don't really know what mastermind they should get into, how does somebody figure out and discover, who they should be through being in a mastermind and then actually execute it?
Well, I would like to separate the question between a fee mastermind, which is very different, and a free mastermind, which is very different. So if you're asking about a free mastermind, then you definitely want to look at who you're paying for what, and do they have a proven record? I know I've paid lots of people who did not, and I'm in masterminds. We have to go there because oftentimes we hear something or see something on social media. We say, oh, yes, that's for me. And then we find out you might know more than the person you're paying because they had a really good funnel, right?
Yeah, totally.
But when you're talking about free masterminds, I would strongly suggest you start your own. Now, again, this is family and friends. And I have some mastermind groups that I've started that's only 3 people, and they've been together almost 20 years, some 10 years, some 5 years. Because again, like-minded and like-spirited, and when the 2 of you come together, because you're choosing one person. I'm gonna go back to your question. How do you know? You know because you chose that person. And I wrote a book called How to Start and Run a Successful Mastermind Group to give some processes and some systems. And many people who started groups have used it because we also have a code of ethics. We also have an agenda. And a lot of times mastermind groups just start willy-nilly, but you don't have a process. And that's why I'm creating the International Mastermind Association to be accountable for the groups themselves, small groups. What are you doing if it doesn't work? And so with that, we have a process where you how much do you want, doing what by when? And each week you come together. When you meet, you're giving an account for that. And when you meet, say there's the 2 of you. Are you in agreement on the third person? And once you get 3 or 4, you may say, you know what, that's it. We don't need any more. So again, I think that that's one way to ensure it's what you want it to be. Otherwise, you're getting in with somebody else. And again, you need to just make sure that you are like-minded. I cannot say this enough. And you're like-spirited. Because if you're not and you know it going in, it's not going to work.
Now, I want to look at a real world practicality. The National Association of Black Women in Construction.
Yes.
It wasn't just a network. It was like a public mastermind. And you were holding it for Black women in construction. But what were you holding them accountable for through that mastermind?
Well, if you look at how we start, I started with a small group of friends. That's how I started. And we're all in the construction industry. I started with one person and we would just talk. And then the second person, what do you need to do to, get your license? And then we went to 3 people. And as we grew and we would meet every week checking in on the bids, because we're focusing solely on the construction industry. Then as we continue to grow and we continue to help other people grow, one of the things I also do too is everything that I do to me should be intentionally congruent. Everything should connect and relate to everything else. So as I got members into the National Association for Black Women in Construction, which is called NABWIC, I also encourage them to read Think and Grow Rich, set their plans for their business. And right now, from doing that process, right now we're in 15 cities across the U.S. It's not considered as a traditional mastermind group because it's grown so large, but there's still individuals who still mastermind their business and also their life who are members of the group.
Now, when you think about that group, first of all, how many members are now in the group?
About 300.
That's amazing. And when you look at building that group, what was the hardest moment of pushback where you had to give a member that? And how did that either shape them or shape you?
Wow. Oftentimes, I find that individuals want to sell something nobody's buying. Mm-hmm. You want to sell something that nobody's buying and or you don't know as much as you need to know, not just about the product, but also the industry, the client. And I'll give you an example. I have a friend who's a painter. She's a part of the group. And she wants to paint everything for everybody. And she came to one of my coaching sessions, if you will, and we targeted her down into a specific industry, which was aviation. Why aviation? Because they pay more than water, than the schools, than healthcare, than transit. And so we were able to niche her down. I call it niche to be rich. Mm-hmm. So the relationships with the individuals, we got that tighter because now you're not trying to go everywhere and be everything to everybody. You're not trying to bid to everybody. You're focusing on one industry. And that's what I find as a part of what we do as National Association of Black Women in Construction. And that comes again from specialized knowledge, from the principle of specialized knowledge in the book, Think and Grow Rich, where he talks about general knowledge versus specialized knowledge. And I took that to the next level. And I said, general industries versus a specialized industry. And from that, I created what I now call a $1 billion luncheon focused on $1 billion industries. And yesterday we actually had a $1 billion luncheon in public-private partnerships. Because again, when you narrow down your niche industry for your niche craft as a member of this organization or just an individual in the construction industry, period. And if you're listening to me, choose your own industry, right? Are you involved with your industry association? Not only do you know them, but do they know you as an expert? That to me is how we mastermind our members to help them focus on being more profitable.
And that's actually a really good pivot because when you start talking about profit, after profit, the next thing that comes is wealth. And when you say wealth isn't earned, it's engineered. I want to look at that specifically related to a family. And I want to talk about the financial mastermind inside a family. How do you talk about wealth in a financial mastermind, and what does that look like inside a family?
Well, I can just take my own family, for example. My youngest daughter, when I started on this journey, we started with the piggy bank. What better way to teach saving and investing in a family? First, before I go there, let's talk about masterminding the family. One of my favorite books in this area is 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families by Stephen Covey. Yes, families. He has 550 references in the back of the book. I think he has 7 or 8 or 9 children himself, and is one of the best family books to mastermind your family. He also shares with you the first thing you should do is you should have a family mission statement. We have a mission statement for our companies, our businesses, our job, and all this, but where's your family mission statement? And every single person in the family should participate in the writing of that family mission statement. So when you talk about building wealth in the family, I used his process, gosh, my daughter's 30, 20 years ago. And I began to implement that along with our family, husband, everybody, as we began to say, who do we want to be known as? Family of speakers, a family of givers, and serving. And so then we each began to go down that path. All of us are speakers, even the children and the grandchildren, because we speak to share. And that's our slogan. That's our motto. So when you talk about building wealth, wealth also starts internal, not just external in the bank account. Because we know, another favorite book is What Would the Rockefellers Do? And it talks about the difference between the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers and how a family office made the difference in the family business. So you talk about leaving a legacy, but also living a life of significance in the family. I think all of those attribute to wealth. So coming back to the family, start with the piggy bank, and then taking the piggy bank to the bank. Can I say that?
When you think of teenagers or, young adults, that sort of thing, I think they can connect with money a little bit differently. How do you introduce money to younger kids without making them feel pressure or entitled, and really connect them to the goal of the importance of money?
Well, I can always share what we've done. Again, I can share what we've done, not just with ourselves, but with other children and other family members' children, where I've taken them on an annual basis, on an annual trip to what's called the World Money Show to expose them to investing. Not only did we do that, but I am a volunteer with an investment organization where we take individuals and we help them start an investment club in families, because that's what we did in our family. And we're members of a nonprofit organization that teaches investing. So when it comes to teenagers, that's what we've done. We've formed youth mastermind groups that are called investment clubs. And they study stocks, they study saving, they study investing. And I tell people it's not financial literacy. We don't do financial literacy. We focus on financial empowerment, because when a child understands, and I use my daughter at 9 years old, she went to her first investment club meeting and she came home, story. We both had investment club meeting that day, the adults and the children, 2 different places. And she came home and opened the newspaper, and she took her little finger, went down the business section of the newspaper, looked at the price for Nike. And she turned in the kitchen and looked at me and she said, "Mommy, now I know the difference between investing in Nike shoes and Nike stock." And she said, "When I grow up, I want to be a financial investor." That was 9 years old. At 30, she retired from her investment. And so that to me is how you start as a young child, and you teach them the benefit and the value, not just about money, but what is $20 to teach a child how to go and invest a $20 bill directly into the market and what they use? It's called, dollar cost averaging. So there are a lot of organizations, and if anybody's interested, I can definitely talk with you offline, because we are members of an organization called Better Investing, BETTER org, and it has a free 90-day membership, and I'm not selling any products. I'm not selling services. That's not what I do. I'm a volunteer. And I believe in this so strongly that that's where freedom comes from. You've heard of FIRE. People want to, retire by 40. Well, my daughter retired by 30. And so it's possible if we learn how to make money, and stop focusing on working for the money, trying to get another job or start another business. Are you learning how to make that money make money? Okay.
It's a little play on words, but it's a dramatic impact on outcome. When you look at making money, that's a time-based approach. When your money's making money, that is a leverage-based approach. I've heard it said many times that, people without money will invest time. People with money will invest to save time.
Exactly.
And so, you have your pillars. And time is one of the biggest currencies that we need to focus on. Now, when we talk about currency of time, there's obviously an expiration date for everybody. And we want to talk a little bit about estate planning, just really from the level of the legacy mastermind that a family would need to make successful estate planning.
Yeah, I think start with the end in mind. Can we start with the end in mind? When we mastermind, as a part of my process, I ask my clients when they come to my retreat, bring your obituary. Bring your obituary. Yes. Bring your obituary. And that's the same thing people say. It's the same thing people say, and they get all, but once they sit down long enough with pen and paper, and I collect obituaries. Yes, I do. I do collect obituaries when I go to somebody else's funeral, and I want to see what people are saying. And I've gone to some funerals where you're looking down at what's on the paper and you're looking down at that box and you're saying, these two don't match. These two don't match. These words don't match the person I know in that box. But nevertheless, if you start with your own obituary and work backwards, so when they come to my retreat and they bring their obituary and they read it, we sit there and we turn it into an affirmation for living. So whatever you want to have said over you when you're gone, turn it over, turn it around, and create it as an I am statement, all those things. Now, once you do that and you say all these wonderful things about your family, then we begin to look at, do they know where your important papers are? I also invite a funeral director to my retreat. And yes, he or she, they go through that process and tell us the horror stories of what happened when people don't do it. And my desire in answering your question is to shock people into the reality of the fact that you are going to die. Now that we've done that and we can face it, now let's live the life you want to live and put things in place for the people you say you love, so that when you're not here any longer, they will bless you and not curse you. Right? And so we go through those exercises, and we have an estate planning person that come to my retreat and put people on the process. We have a financial person that comes. And so we actually sit there and go through the processes. I've gone through this. Like I said, I was in probate court for 15 years and I still ended up losing my family residence. And it was because I did not know, and my family did not know, that the last thing you should ever put in a will is anything that changes title. Now, we studied this. After that happened, we studied this as a part of our mastermind process. We came to the financial area and we read something. It doesn't have to be an entire book, but we read something in every single one of these areas. And we come back like a book club and we share it with each other. And it's so empowering. And that to me is another benefit of masterminding with like-minded, like-spirited people who are going to bring you information that you never thought about. And so just something as simple as, do not put anything that changes title in a will, even a car, a bank account, real estate. If it has to change title, put it in a trust. And so those are simple things that can save a family nightmares.
Yeah,
Joe Robbie got an example. Sorry to cut you, but Joe Robbie is an excellent example of what happens when you don't do that.
Yeah, share the Joe Robbie story. And
What
what you
Joe
learned
Robbie,
about that, and why avoiding these conversations until it's too late is massive trip.
Absolutely. Well, I went to college in Miami, and Joe Robbie owned the Dolphins and the Robbie Stadium, if you will, in Miami. He was a lawyer and he was a CPA, both. Busy businessman. He died without a will. His everything went into probate court. 5, 10, 15 years. Family could not access one penny. One of his children became homeless. The others began to fight, but it's tied up in court. Heisinger bought the Dolphins and the stadium for pennies on the dollar, and this case became a law school case study of what not to do. And so that's on the big side. But we can also talk about Madoff. Very wealthy people gave him their money and did not know they would never see it again. I mean, so there's so many stories, but I had to come to the realization, and I am at that point, I am responsible for my life. We're talking about family and legacy. And so when you mastermind and you answer the tough questions, when grandma dies, what happens to everything and everybody? Can we go talk to her now? When daddy dies, what happens? When I die, what happens? And as a part of our mastermind group, we walk through those, and then sometimes it takes years to get up the guts to actually have the conversation, but it's so worth it. You can lose everything or you can gain everything, because I'll tell anybody right now, I have 5 businesses, but I just came back from a 5.5, almost 6-month world cruise. And I would tell anybody who asked me about that trip, and the investment came not from my business. Can I say this? It came from the making money that I invested years ago, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. The trip came from that money, not from my company. Why? Because in our businesses, we tend to lose more money than we make. We don't talk about that publicly. So when you begin to understand the value and the benefit of a $20 bill compounded over 10, 20, 30 years, once a month, it's not 6 figures, it's 7 figures.
My son learned that very quickly. He lent my other son money to buy a video game. And he said, well, I want you to pay me back. And if you don't pay me back, there's going to be this thing called interest. And so he started to charge my other son interest weekly. He charged him, a little bit high, but he charged him 1% a week. He said, you should pay me back. It's 1% a week. They agreed on it. They put it in writing, and it was 1% a week. Well, 4, 5, 6 weeks goes by, and he's watching the money build up on the board. He's going, I'm not doing anything. I'm making more money. I'm like, yeah, that's money making money.
That's it.
And you could see his eyes. He's like, I really like this interest thing. I mean,
Yes.
as long as you're on the collecting side, not the paying side.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The reverse side is that it's called a credit card.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And people don't realize they're paying. One of my other favorite books is The Automatic Millionaire, where David Bark talks about he bought things that he didn't need and put them in storage, and he was paying storage on storage on things that he was paying for. So he's paying for yes. And that's how he came up with
We've
this.
all been there. I did that with my construction business. I had 3, 4 different storage, because I went from a large space down to a smaller space. I had all this stuff. I'm like, I can't get rid of it. It's going to be valuable someday. So I ended up paying for all these storage things. And then I realized after the year, I looked at my storage cost, was worth more than the stuff that was in it.
Exactly. Especially when you're still paying for the stuff that's in it.
Yeah. Well, those ones, luckily I wasn't in that scenario. That would have been definitely a compounding problem. Yeah.
But again, if you don't take time to look at it, and to me, that's where masterminding comes in. When you're masterminding with like-minded, like individuals, and you're willing to be vulnerable and look at everything. So we start off talking about the family and leaving a legacy. And I will go back to one way to do that is to start with a family mission statement. Also start a family investment club. And it's more about the financial empowerment of the members to learn about saving and investing and stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all of these different tools that you can use, like interest, like your son, but also debt. But having a place that the family can come once a week and talk about money, where we often don't do that. And an investment club and or a mastermind group is a really good place to do that for the family. And see, that's why, for me, one of the reasons why I'm very big on creating free family and friends mastermind groups to add value to families, to give them a place and a space and also a vehicle and a platform to build the family. Because nobody teaches us really how to be a family, if you will. You can read books, but how do you actually do that? What does that look like?
Yeah, and I think that's so critical, that most people run their business like a business, but they run their family with chaos. And because we've never really been taught. Whatever happened to us as kids, we just emulate it going forward. And we don't actually assess the situation and bring it forward. And it's just like masterminding. A lot of people, they'll say, yeah, we're just going to kind of hang out at the bar, or we hang out after the gym. And that's my water cooler talk, that sort of thing. I want to close off with the idea around a one rule scenario, the one rule to beat all rules about masterminding. What is the one rule you never break, no matter what?
I go back to, you must have a dream to have a dream come true. That's my rule, because I am driven in the 10 areas of my life by having a dream in every area. For example, my dream for my health is my wealth. And I make daily deposits and investments in that. So I would say my one rule is that you must, Ann McNeill, have a dream, to have a dream come true in every area of your life. And it is non-negotiable, non-negotiable. My family is first, and nothing, even bringing them with me to conferences and whatever. What is my dream for my family? No excuses. So I would say you must have a dream to have a dream come true. Non-negotiable.
I think that's a very beautiful non-negotiable. And when you're masterminding, saying that it green is, you have congruency around it.
Yes.
Then that makes it unstoppable.
Absolutely. With a plan and actions and accountability.
And it's been an absolute pleasure going through this journey with you and masterminding and around family, around money, and around legacy. And you make such an impact in the world through your books, through the courses that you have, through the masterminding that you do, and the businesses that you run. And I think everybody's blessed to have spent time with you. And I am one of those people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, this is the money. This is the mindset. This is the mentoring podcast. We'll see you on the next.